Alright guys, welcome to my channel guys. So this is our update for Simon Ekpa's bail for tomorrow. Every Biafrans are actually looking up for a happy news tomorrow as Simon Ekpa will be released. But there's a lot of tension within the Nigerian government. Having to say that immediately Simon Ekpa is released, even if he doesn't say anything, that his presence alone is going to create a lot of chaos within the people that has been sent or within the government in general, more especially the Imo State and Anambra State governor, Imo State and Anambra State, and then in Enugu and some other states that are under Biafran map. So I like you guys to listen to all the detailed updates in this particular video, and we'll be right back.
Emphasizing his right to promote self-determination under international law. Simon Ekpa maintained he never called for violence or rebellion, stating that the Nigerian government's long-standing oppression was the root cause of any unrest, not his broadcasts from Finland. The prosecutor listed 10 strict bail conditions, including public renunciation of Biafran movements, passport surrender, GPS tracking, shutting down all media channels, daily police check-ins, a gag order on Nigerian issues, financial transparency, and $200,000 bonds from 2 Finnish citizens. The most contentious condition required Simon Ekpa to surrender all personal communication devices for forensic investigation, a move his lawyer strongly opposed as unconstitutional and a violation of privacy rights. Simon Ekpa's lawyer described the 9th condition as a backdoor for state surveillance disguised as a bail requirement and warned it would set a dangerous legal precedent, calling it a violation of both national and international human rights laws. The courtroom became charged as both legal teams debated the legality and morality of the bail terms, particularly the demand for device seizure, with the defense accusing the prosecution of bypassing due legal processes. However, no final decision had been announced by the judge regarding whether Simon Ekpa would be granted bail under any or all of the proposed conditions, leaving the courtroom in suspense and the public awaiting the outcome. The court session centered on a controversial bail condition number 9, which sought to grant prosecutors full access to Simon Ekpa's communication devices, including phones, laptops, and personal records. Simon Ekpa's lawyer strongly opposed this. The prosecutor argued that Simon Ekpa's broadcasts may have incited violence and unrest in Nigeria, claiming access to his devices was necessary to investigate public safety threats and possible sedition. Simon Ekpa's lawyer countered that this demand was unconstitutional and amounted to digital coercion. He said it infringed on Simon Ekpa's rights to privacy, freedom of expression, legal defense, and journalistic confidentiality. The courtroom witnessed a fierce back and forth between the prosecution and defense, with the judge asking Simon Ekpa's lawyer to clearly state why he found the condition intolerable. The lawyer said it created a dangerous legal precedent by treating presumption of innocence as suspicion of guilt. The judge requested Simon Ekpa's lawyer to propose bail terms that were fair, yet addressed the seriousness of the allegations. Simon Ekpa's lawyer suggested bail terms including residence restrictions in Lahti, Finland, a travel ban, weekly police reporting, surrender of passports, non-interference with witnesses, a ban on inciting statements, a financial surety of $40,000, a written commitment to attend trial, a digital activity declaration, and automatic bail revocation upon violation. The prosecuting lawyer rejected these proposed conditions, saying they were too weak, unenforceable, and did not reflect the severity of the charges against Simon Ekpa. The disagreement between both sides became so intense that the presiding judge had to intervene and calm things down before calling for a short recess. The session ended with both legal teams asked to take a break and reconvene later. No final decision was made on the bail application during this part of the proceedings. On a chilly June morning in the city of Helsinki, located in the northern European country of Finland, a remarkable courtroom session took place that drew attention not only across the Nordic region, but also thousands of miles away in Nigeria, particularly in the southeastern part of the country. The session involved a man whose name had grown increasingly controversial and powerful in equal measure: Simon Njoku Ekpa. Simon Njoku Ekpa, a Finnish-Nigerian citizen, had become one of the loudest voices speaking about the Biafran self-determination struggle. For months, he had broadcast videos and live sessions from his base in Finland, making calls for civil disobedience and criticizing the Nigerian government. Supporters praised him for speaking up against oppression. Opponents accused him of inciting unrest and fueling violence in a region already torn apart by political tension, economic hardship, and security crises. The courtroom in Helsinki was tightly packed on that day, the 23rd of June 2025. At the center of the room stood Simon Njoku Ekpa, dressed in a plain, neat suit, his face calm, but his eyes carrying the weight of months of international attention, controversies, online battles, and personal sacrifice. His legal counsel, a composed and confident man named Attorney Kalgmer, stood beside him, prepared to make an argument that could decide the immediate future of his client. Simon Njoku Ekpa's case had reached a crucial moment. This day was not about guilt or innocence, not yet. This day was about freedom or continued detention. It was about whether the Finnish judicial system would allow Simon Njoku Ekpa to go home while his trial continued, or whether he would remain in custody. Attorney Kalgmer began by submitting a formal application for bail. In his opening statement, Attorney Kalgmer made it clear that bail is not a privilege, nor is it a favor that the court grants based on emotion or sympathy. He reminded the court that bail is a legal right. It is a recognition of the presumption of innocence, a principle that every democratic society must uphold. He explained that his client, Simon Njoku Ekpa, had never attempted to run from the law. Simon had made himself available for questioning. He had respected the requests of Finnish authorities and cooperated with investigators. Attorney Kalgmer also argued that Simon had strong community ties in Finland. He lived in Lahti, a town just outside of Helsinki. He had family. He had a home. He was not a flight risk. He was not someone likely to disappear if granted temporary freedom. Most importantly, Attorney Kalgmer emphasized that Simon Njoku Ekpa was willing to comply with any reasonable bail conditions. These could include restrictions on travel, regular check-ins with the police, and even temporary limits on his public communication. He insisted that Simon was not running from justice. He was standing for it. As Attorney Kalgmer concluded his argument, there was a moment of silence. But it did not last long. The prosecutor, representing the Finnish government in cooperation with diplomatic concerns raised by the Nigerian government, stood to deliver a firm rebuttal. The prosecutor was direct. He warned the court that releasing Simon Njoku Ekpa could have serious consequences, not just for Finland, but especially for Nigeria, where he claimed the impact of Simon's online messages had already caused harm. The prosecutor argued that Simon Njoku Ekpa's influence extended far beyond the borders of Finland. With the power of the internet, especially social media, the prosecutor claimed that Simon had the ability to reach thousands of people instantly. According to the prosecution, some of these messages had inspired acts of unrest, protests, and in some cases, violence in the southeastern region of Nigeria. The prosecutor argued that Simon's release, even under restrictions, could create a renewed wave of tension, protests, and disorder in Nigeria. He acknowledged that Simon never explicitly told people to pick up weapons or engage in violence, but the prosecutor said the tone of his broadcasts, combined with his support for Biafran secession, had inflamed the situation. To support his case, the prosecutor referenced several of Simon's past statements. These statements, according to the prosecutor, crossed the line between activism and incitement. But Simon Yoku Ekpa did not stay silent. When given the chance to respond, he stood calmly and spoke directly to the court. He explained that he was not a criminal, nor was he a threat. He described himself as an activist, someone who uses his voice to speak out against injustice. He said that the root cause of any unrest in Nigeria was not his social media broadcasts, but the oppression and marginalization of the Biafran people. He stated clearly that he had never called for violence, rebellion, or armed conflict. He spoke of the right to self-determination, which is recognized under international law. He said he believed in peaceful advocacy, even if it was uncomfortable for those in power. What followed was a long and tense back and forth between the legal teams. But the real turning point came when the prosecutor listed 10 proposed bail conditions that he believed were necessary if Simon Nyoku Ekpa were to be released from detention. The list was long and strict. It began with a demand that Simon publicly renounce all support for the Biafran independence movement. Then there was the requirement for him to surrender his Finnish and Nigerian passports. Another condition included a GPS monitoring device to track his movements at all times. The prosecutor also asked that Simon shut down all of his media channels and cease all public communication related to Nigerian politics. The judge said that the bail hearing was not over. He would take more time to consider the legal, moral, and security implications of the conditions before reaching a final verdict. But the story did not end there. The very next day, news began to spread across social media and international platforms. After hours of private deliberation, the Finnish court had finally reached a decision. Simon Nyoku Ekpa had been granted bail. The final ruling did not include all the prosecutor's demands. The court rejected condition number 9, stating that it was overly intrusive and violated Simon's right to privacy and due process. The judge said that while public safety was important, it could not come at the cost of basic human rights. However, several other conditions were included in the bail order. Simon Nyoku Ekpa would be confined to Lahti, Finland. He was required to report to the police every week. He surrendered both his Nigerian and Finnish passports. He agreed not to interfere with the ongoing investigation. He could not make any public statements encouraging unrest. A €40,000 financial bond was secured. He promised to appear in court at every session. Simon Nyoku Ekpa walked out of the courtroom that evening, not as a free man, but as a man temporarily released under watchful eyes. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked questions. Supporters cheered, while critics expressed frustration. But for Simon himself, the moment was bittersweet. He knew the battle was not over. He had won a legal victory, but the larger war over truth, justice, and the Biafran struggle remained ongoing. As night fell over Helsinki, Simon Nyoku Ekpa returned home, not to a celebration, but to a quiet room filled with legal files, notes, and memories of the courtroom drama that had just unfolded. He sat down, took a deep breath, and began preparing for the next phase of the journey. A journey that promised to be as legally complex, emotionally demanding, and politically explosive as the one that had just ended. After the Finnish court finally granted Simon Nyoku Ekpa bail, a wave of reactions began spreading far beyond the courtroom walls. The legal victory was not just a moment of personal relief for Simon Nyoku Ekpa. It became a turning point in the broader discussion around Biafran self-determination, press freedom, political expression, and the legal boundaries of international activism. The very first thing Simon Nyoku Ekpa did after leaving the Helsinki courthouse was to quietly thank his legal team, particularly his lawyer, Attorney Kalgmer. Their relationship had grown not just professionally but personally over the weeks of preparation. Attorney Kalgmer had stood by Simon's side through one of the most emotionally intense battles of his life, and though the war was not over, the bail ruling gave them a chance to rest, reorganize, and prepare for the upcoming trial with greater flexibility. Simon was not alone as he left the court. Outside, dozens of his supporters gathered. Some waved flags, others simply offered hugs and prayers. Cameras from both Finnish and Nigerian news outlets surrounded him, trying to capture a statement or an expression. But Simon Nyoku Ekpa, though clearly moved, kept his words brief. He said only that he was grateful for justice and that his faith in the legal process remained strong. He asked for peace, patience, and calm, promising that the truth would be revealed in due time. Back at his residence in Lahti, a quiet town just outside the main city of Helsinki, Simon tried to return to some normalcy. He had strict rules to follow. He had surrendered his passports. He was not allowed to make public statements about Nigerian political issues. He had to report to the police once a week. His digital activities would be watched closely. Any violation of the terms would lead to immediate bail revocation. These restrictions turned his temporary freedom into a controlled existence. But to Simon, it was still better than the cold uncertainty of a jail cell. Meanwhile, the news of his bail spread rapidly throughout Nigeria. In Enugu, Aba, Onitsha, Owerri, and Umuahia, major cities in Nigeria's southeastern region, discussions exploded across radio stations, town squares, and social media platforms. Supporters of the Biafran independence cause saw the court decision as a moral victory. To them, it meant that the world was finally recognizing that Simon Nyoku Ekpa was not a terrorist or a violent criminal, but a political advocate fighting for the voice of a people long marginalized. However, government officials in Nigeria reacted with disapproval. The Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a carefully worded statement expressing disappointment in the Finnish court's decision. The statement did not mention Simon Nyoku Ekpa by name, but emphasized the importance of international cooperation in fighting cross-border threats. Privately, some Nigerian security officials expressed concern that Simon's release could lead to renewed tension and restlessness in the southeastern region. They believed that even if Simon did not speak directly, his presence outside prison would still inspire movements they considered dangerous. In Abuja, Nigeria's capital city, several meetings were held between high-ranking officials from the Nigerian police force, the Department of State Services, and the Ministry of Justice. They discussed how best to respond to the Finnish court's decision and what diplomatic channels could be used to express dissatisfaction. Some government-aligned media houses accused Finland of interfering in Nigeria's domestic affairs. But not everyone in the Nigerian establishment agreed with that position. Some lawyers, journalists, and civil society advocates praised the Finnish court's insistence on legal fairness. They argued that if Nigeria wanted to charge Simon Nyoku Ekpa with any crimes, it should present clear evidence in a legal forum, not rely on diplomatic pressure. These voices reminded the public that freedom of expression, especially on matters of identity and self-determination, was protected under various international laws. At the same time, Biafran diaspora communities in the United Kingdom, the United States, South Africa, and Canada began holding small, peaceful demonstrations in support of Simon Nyoku Ekpa. They carried banners that read, "Justice for Biafra," and "Activism is not terrorism." In London, a group of Nigerian-born activists stood in front of the Finnish embassy holding placards and demanding fair treatment for Simon. One woman, a middle-aged teacher originally from Abia State, told reporters that Simon is our voice abroad. The Nigerian government has tried to silence him, but the world is watching. Inside Finland, public opinion was mixed. Some people believed that the Finnish court had done the right thing by respecting Simon Nyoku Ekpa's legal rights and standing by democratic principles. Others worried that the case might damage Finland's diplomatic ties with Nigeria, one of Africa's largest economies. In the Finnish parliament, a few lawmakers raised questions about whether Simon's activities posed any threat to local safety. But the Finnish government remained mostly silent, stating that the courts were independent and that the legal process would continue without political interference. Simon Nyoku Ekpa, meanwhile, spent his days working with his lawyer to prepare for the upcoming full trial. He could not speak to the public about Nigeria, but he could still speak to his legal team and write notes. He began compiling documents, legal precedents, and video materials that would be used to support his defense. He believed that the truth would eventually protect him, but he also knew that trials were not always won on truth alone. They were won through strategy, preparation, and clarity. He also stayed in regular contact with his family. His wife, who had remained mostly private during the case, now became more emotionally visible. She supported her husband's legal battle from the shadows, protecting their children and keeping the home stable while Simon faced the court. For her, the bail was a welcome break from weeks of fear and uncertainty. Still, she worried about what the future might hold. Simon's children, still young, did not fully understand what was happening. To them, their father had been away for a while, and now he was home again. Simon tried to spend more time with them. He told them stories at night, helped them with schoolwork, and tried to pretend, for a few hours each day, that everything was normal. But every day, news continued to pour in from Nigeria. The situation in the southeastern region remained tense. Local vigilante groups clashed with security forces. Markets opened and closed based on rumors of unrest. Some groups claimed loyalty to Simon Nyoku Ekpa, saying they were following his earlier calls for civil disobedience. Others rejected his methods, calling for more peaceful dialogue. Simon heard all of this, but he could not respond. His bail conditions forbade him from making any political statements. It was a silence that frustrated many of his followers. But for Simon, it was a test of discipline and faith. He believed that silence, in this case, was not surrender, but strategy. The trial was coming, and the trial would be his chance to speak clearly, legally, and directly, not just to Finland, but to the world. As the trial date approached, more legal and political figures began to take an interest in the case. Human rights organizations based in Europe started monitoring the proceedings. A few legal scholars published articles about the case, debating whether Simon Nyoku Ekpa's online speeches could be legally classified as incitement or whether they were simply protected political speech. One article published in a Swedish legal journal described the case as a collision between national security and digital rights. For Simon Nyoku Ekpa, the days ahead would be challenging. The courtroom would not only be a place of legal arguments, it would be a stage where the world would watch a man try to defend his beliefs, his rights, and his reputation under the pressure of international scrutiny.